You spend thousands on your camera system, but here's the part nobody put on a spec sheet. The batteries have an expiration date. Insta360, they are probably the clearest example for the fragmentation. Each one of the 1X, 2X, 3X, 4X, 5 used a different battery. It's like you were not able to literally grow with the camera. We tracked every major manufacturer: Canon, Sony, Panasonic, GoPro, DJI, Insta360. Some are quietly stranding you. One company got it completely right. You know, like if I was a camera manufacturer, I would do it exactly like Fuji. I would just say, okay, these are the two standards we have. Let's build the camera system around it rather than think about the camera and then invent a new battery every time, like Insta360, for example, seems to be doing. And then the man who invented the stabilized camera. There's a new documentary about Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam, backed by Francis Ford Coppola, in production now. And his rule for a perfect shot is the whole philosophy in one line. He says one thing in the pitch trailer here, Mr. Brown, that you need to be willing to look like an idiot to get a perfect shot. Plus, the free apps filmmakers are now vibe coding for themselves and all of us. Let's get into it.
This is Focus Check, the weekly Cinetech podcast.
Welcome to episode 124 of CineD Focus Check. My name is Nino, and unfortunately today I'm here without Johnny, who's taking a well-deserved week off, their first week in Japan. But for some in-between questions, I have Felix here, our producer, to, give me some room to breathe at some point.
Yeah, I will try to step in when needed, but yeah.
Yeah, so let's try to keep it shorter because it's a monologue essentially. And here's a summary of what I'm going to talk about today. So first of all, I worked on an article about batteries. Sounds boring, but it's actually quite interesting because camera manufacturers like to change battery standards. Some do a lot more than others, and we decided to look into that. Like, how sustainable are the batteries of your camera system? Like, can you use them for the next generation or can you not? So I decided to look at each one of the camera manufacturers and drone manufacturers and action cam manufacturers and just track how long can you use it, how many standards are there, and so on. And some very, very interesting results. So I'm going to start off with that. After that, I'm going to change to the subject of the Steadicam documentary, Thank You, Mr. Brown, about Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam. So there is a documentary now in the works, which is fascinating. It's by Andrew Schwartz, who's a longtime collaborator of Garrett Brown. And yeah, it just tracks the whole history back to the original Rocky movie, where I think it was the first feature film where it was used, and later on The Shining, of course. We'll talk about that and dive a little bit in the history of stabilized cameras with Garrett Brown. We'll talk about the newly announced ARRI Alexa 35 Live Xtreme. So that's the live version of the Alexa 35 Xtreme that was announced also not too long ago. The high-speed version of the Alexa 35, now capable of live transmission because, of course, sports and so on. We'll also talk about actually a camera that I found on Kickstarter, which, completely went over my head. I just found it accidentally, and I thought it's worth reporting about. It's a small, really small pocket camera called AulGo from a company called TriLife that we've never heard of. I think they're based out of Taiwan. And it's very interesting. It's a small 4K Sony, small 4K camera, and has a Sony sensor in it. It's tiny. It's really tiny, and I think it's worth looking at that. We'll also talk about Sony teasing a new RX10, which is their first generation of that bridge camera in over 9 years. I mean, by the time you hear this, it might already be out because it's going to be announced on July 9th. We'll talk about the KipperTie LCcineND, which is a variable electronic ND in a 4/5.6 inch tray filter, which is of course based on the LCtech technology that we've talked about a lot of times before, and we actually awarded them one of our Best of Show awards a couple of years ago. We also talk about the KNOWLED PL600 RF and PL1200 RF, two new COB full color lights from Godox under the KNOWLED brand. We'll also talk about Tilta bringing some new iPhone lenses to their Chronos ecosystem, which essentially is, like it enables you to rig up your phone, specifically the iPhone, but also Android phones. But I think these are specific to the iPhone, all kinds of different focal lengths now out. We'll talk about the IPO of Bending Spoons, which is the owner of Vimeo and Filmic Pro. We'll talk about also Boris Effects acquiring iZotope, which is a very, very popular audio plugin. Felix can say some stuff about that because he's been using it for a very long time, I think. We will talk about our opinion article by Masha Dekova on the reality of social media influence on film, a very interesting subject, how social media marketing is actually helpful and influencing the marketing of traditional films these days. We'll talk about two apps that have been vibe coded, which seems to be a new category actually in the podcast, because every week we get so many requests from people that really literally vibe coded an app for filmmakers. And this week we'll talk about the Beat app, which is a free Mac app for story development and shoot planning. And also we'll talk about Clip Sweeper version 2, which is also a free Mac app for cleaning video project drives of files you don't actually use anymore. And then sticking with software, we'll talk about Artemis Studio for Mac, which is the desktop companion app to the Director's Viewfinder app by Artemis, or the company is called Chemical Wedding. But, a lot of people know the Artemis Viewfinder app, and now they have a companion app, Artemis Studio. It's actually been out for a while. We just haven't reported about it, so I thought I did that. And then, last but not least, another tiny update to DaVinci Resolve. That's 21.0.2, which brings some fixes and improvements. That's going to be the last topic for today. But let's start off with the camera battery subject. So, Felix, how many different batteries do you have at home for, let's say, or in your studio for?
Let me think. I think I have Sony, then Panasonic. Two types of Sony batteries. Then Panasonic also two types, and I think the classic ones, the NPFs and those batteries. So I have a wall with different, 5 or 6 different chargers with different batteries. So I don't to be honest, don't know the exact number, but as with a lot of things, you have so many batteries that different types that you kind of collect over the years. Yeah.
I think it's impossible to keep track. We have drawers and drawers full of batteries. So what stirred this article was actually a comment by my friend Philip Bloom, who texted me that we should look into the subject of longevity of batteries and how often manufacturers will actually use the same standard of batteries for their cameras when they release a new camera. And the reason why we started this was that he learned that Insta360 actually discontinued the 1R and 1RS. These were modular cameras that you might remember, where you could literally stick together and combine different modules of camera lenses and recording modules and batteries to different sizes. So they discontinued the product, but they also discontinued the batteries, and that product is only 5 years old. So if you need new batteries for that device, you're kind of screwed. You need to buy it probably second market. You need to find a dealer that still has some in stock. And it's crazy because the thing is only 5 years old, right? You should just still be able to get them. So I did a little bit of a deep dive, and to keep it fair, to really look at every manufacturer in the industry. So it's a little bit insane. Let's just go through one by one. So Insta360, when you look at their cameras, and specifically, of course, they have a lot of different 360 cameras. They now have a lot of different action cameras. They also have a drone now, which is, of course, not under their brand, but still, they are probably the clearest example for the fragmentation. There is the 1X line, which is now X5, each one of the 1X, 2X, 3, X4, X5 used a different battery. It's like you were not able to literally grow with the camera. So if you upgraded, you needed to buy, additional batteries every time. You could not reuse the ones that you had. The capacities have climbed, which is great, of course. I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why they just changed the battery. But every step forward, you had a new battery, so it was incompatible backwards. Now, it was even more complicated with the modular ones that I mentioned, the 1R and the 1RS. So a single camera generation there could involve 3 separate battery bases, which were standard boosted and vertical. And the 1-inch 360 edition actually used its own vertical base that does not interchange with the standard 1RS base. So, and now it's all kind of discontinued, so you can't get them anymore. And then there's, of course, the Go series, which has tiny internal cells paired with an action pod, and the Ace and Ace Pro, they share the battery that is still carried forward in the Ace Pro 2. At least that, for the normal, that's probably something they learned they had to do because GoPro did the same, right? GoPro, we'll talk about them in a little bit as well. They upgraded the battery capacity, but kept them forward compatible, but not backwards compatible. So some of the newer GoPros and also the new Ace Pro 2 can use an older battery, but it will actually perform best if you use the new battery. So yeah, anyway, that's the only example in their entire lineup of Insta360 where something is compatible with each other. It's not true for the rest. So yeah, that's really a lot of kind of planned obsolescence. Now, moving on to DJI, of course, Insta360's biggest competitor right now. They didn't have a good track record in the past with battery compatibility. I mean, look at this. Those are all the drone batteries that we could find from DJI. I mean, it's all the different ones we have. And, that goes from every Mavic iteration to the Air, to the Mini, to even, Inspire 3. All of them are there. And I'm sure we actually, missed some that we don't have in-house or whatever. But it's a lot of different ones. However, the good thing is they seem to have learned. Well, first of all, in their cameras, specifically their action cams and their 360 cam, the Osmo 360, the Action 4, Action 5 Pro, Action 6, Osmo Action 3 also, and the Osmo 360 all use the same, they call it the Action Xtreme battery. So that's really nice. Like you upgrade, it's all the same. Also, again, this is something, I guess, like GoPro also forwards compatible. And the only thing about Insta360, which is great as well, in their batteries, they do the same with their Ace Pro Action Cam series. And all those action cameras are, of course, directly competing with each other. So that's probably where they looked at the competition. It's like, let's keep it the same. Now, this is great. And also, we know from the Pocket series, there is this, of course, the Pocket has a battery built in, but there is this extension battery. And I can confirm that you can use the extension battery from the Pocket 3 also on the 4 and the 4P. It just literally needs to upgrade the firmware. So like you plug it in the first time and it will tell you, I need to upgrade the firmware of the battery in order to be able to use it. And after you've done that, you can literally use it. So then that's really useful to keep these interchangeable, of course.
I think also the Ronin series has almost the same batteries. So the RS4, RS3, I think they were always the same. So also
that's a good point. Actually, we didn't look at the gimbals.
Yeah.
I kind of forgot the gimbals, but we should have looked at the gimbals. I'm not sure. Is it always the same grip though?
With the small ones, like the one-handed gimbals, I'm pretty sure that they
I know the extension one, like this higher capacity one, is compatible between the RS4 and 3. I haven't tried it on the RS5, and I'm not sure if the actual handle, like the native handle, will work. Well, maybe I'll update this article and we'll look into that because that's worth by the time you see this, I might already have updated the article. But that's, but you're right. I mean, I know that at least some of it was compatible with each other, but it's a very good point. Because if you buy especially the one that has the extended, what is it called? The one that has the higher capacity, basically, which is an optional purchase.
RS Pro or also
just the grip. I mean, just the grip. Buy the extended.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact name, but
I think that one was compatible with several generations at least. Yeah, but yeah, that's a good point. And with drones, they've also become better. I mean, that used to be their weak spot, but now they've learned. The Mini 3 series intelligent flight battery is officially supported across the Mini 3, Mini 3 Pro, and Mini 4 Pro, which is unusual for DJI. And on the larger side, the Air 3S battery is cross-compatible with the Air 3. I think I haven't mentioned the Mavic 4 here, which I should also add, but I think that there were so many different versions of the Mavic 3. I remember that the Mavic 3 and the Mavic 3 Pro and Pro Cine at least used the same ones. I have to check if it's the same for the Mavic 4. Again, this is something we need to update here as well. But they are learning. I mean, that's, to make a long story short, DJI is getting better at reusing their batteries for newer generations of their drones, which is great. Because there were tiny, I mean, if you look at those different batteries from the past, there were sometimes really tiny differences and they looked almost the same, but they weren't quite the same. So you couldn't really, and it was particularly frustrating with every new generation of I call it Mavic series because they all used to be called Mavic, but I mean the foldable rotor series that kind of all look the same in different sizes, which includes the Mini, the Air, and the Mavic. And they've definitely become better in this. But yeah, check out this article if you want to really track which one is compatible with what. Then let's move on to Canon. Now, Canon actually is probably the best example here. They're really a benchmark for longevity when it comes to battery because the LPE6 battery standard that came out with the original 5D Mark II, which, started this whole thing here, they have literally used this to this very day. I mean, they have upgraded it. It has evolved to an LPE6N, which is a higher capacity. Then it became a LPE6NH, which launched with the R5 and R6, and most recently the LPE6P. Now, the physical form factor has never changed, so a battery bought new today can still go into an older body. It just has a higher capacity, which is amazing. So they actually make your older cameras last longer because they kept the form factor. And that also means you can use the same charger. Now, what we haven't tracked here is their larger batteries for their Cinema Series cameras because we just simply don't have any in-house. But I think also they didn't change that much. I mean, I only have very old ones from the original C300 here, but we decided not to include them here. But in terms of the mirrorless / DSLR type batteries, the LPE6 standard is still amazingly well used. And the great thing is also that a lot of third-party manufacturers use it for accessories like monitors and so on. It's just, I think it's a great standard. And it's a very, I always like them better than the NPF standard, actually, to be honest, the Sony kind of open standard that's now also used in a lot of monitors because it's so old. But I think the density of the power that you get in an LPE6 standard doesn't even matter which version of that is much higher. And they last relatively long still.
I also always like the LPE6 standard for different accessories and stuff. And I think NPF is nice, but sometimes a bit flimsy when you also charge it with those two connectors and stuff. Yeah, so I also prefer the LPE6.
I can't tell you how often I've dropped one on the floor when adding it to a small HD monitor or whatever, and it just wouldn't stick.
Same thing, like with those two connectors and this flimsy lock-in mechanism. I don't know. It's I also think that Canon did a better job in thinking about the the locking mechanism at least. Yeah.
And they seem to be, I don't know if it's a licensing thing or if the patent or license whatever has expired, because it's a lot of other companies also using it, right? I mean, I think there's Blackmagic cameras that use LP6, right?
I think so too. Yeah.
I mean, they have some MPF, and so they. We'll talk about Blackmagic in a second, anyway. Now, already mentioned Sony. Now, Sony, when it comes to the mirrorless cameras, they've now just moved on to their third standard, essentially. They originally started with I think it was called NP-FW50, which was those tiny batteries you had in the original A7S, and a lot of different cameras. I think it's also still in use for some of their entry-level cameras to this day. However, they've moved on to a physically larger battery, which I like a lot more, called NP-FZ100, which is to this day used in most of the Alpha series cameras, also the FX3, FX30, and so on. And this has 2,280 milliwatt hours. So, because that was one of the problems of the NP-FW50, it had only around 1,000 milliwatt hours, and then they did more than double. I mean, it literally, one of the biggest problems of the original A7S and all the cameras in this generation was that the battery just didn't last very long. And then they really learned from that and made this new battery standard that really had 2.2 times the energy, and you could feel it when you were shooting with the cameras. I mean, you literally, to this day, I think they last relatively long. I think it's like 2 hours or something if you shoot 4K with most of the cameras. And so the A7S 3, A1, A9 series, A7R 3 to 5, A7 3 to 4, also the Alpha 6600, Alpha 6700, and as I mentioned, the FX3 and FX30 used that standard. Now, recently, with the introduction of the A7R6, they have introduced a completely new battery standard, which is called NPSA100, which is the one you see here at the back on this image. Completely different shape. It's more like a upright shape now with the connectors here on top. Now, in terms of capacity, it's not doubled again. It's a little bit more. It's 2,670 milliwatt hours. So that's 25% more than the predecessor, the FZ100. And we can expect this battery standard to be really the standard for all their Alpha and maybe FX cameras going forward, right? I mean, this is going to replace the FZ100. So again, they have changed the form factor, but I think they've done so in a reasonable way. They've not done it with every generation. It's really lasted always at least 6-7 years or something like that. So that's good. Why exactly they needed to upgrade now, even though the capacity is not that much different, I'm not sure. My guess is that the shape is also more fitting and more kind of space saving in terms of, because the connectors are in a different spot, which might allow them to be more flexible with how the actual grip is handled. And if you look at, and that also leads me to to their other standard, the BPU standard, which is used in the more professional cameras up to this day. The shape is more similar to the BPU standard. Now, the BPU standard is something that I had first contact with a very long time ago when I bought an EX3, I think in 2009, something like that. So it's really been in use since then, very, very long time. And it's the standard still for their larger FX camera. So it's still for the FX6, it was in the FX9, it was in the FS7, FS5, I think even the F5 and F55 used it. So it was really, it's been used for a very, very long time. And this, so the BPU standard, I think is great because it's always in cameras that are not limited by size of battery, basically because it's sticking out of the back. So you can have them in different sizes, and there's really small ones and very big ones, like here. And I think there's still a license to this because I don't know any non-Sony product that uses them. Actually, they're really only just for their cameras, as far as I'm aware. But then there's also the MPF standard, which is their older standard, which BPU actually replaced. I think MPF was, even for older Sony cameras in the early 2000s. And this is the one we already talked about. So, this is really like an open standard now. There's everybody and their mom makes them. You get them from so many different manufacturers. I'm sure it's an expired patent or something. And they are used all over the place for monitors, even lights, other cameras.
Audio recorder as well.
Audio recorders, exactly. It's a nice, and the smallest form factor is really also in body of a lot of cameras. I think we have it also in the latest Kinefinity Vista. They uses the MPF as well. Now the power density, to be honest, is not great. I always feel like they're not very strong for the size that they have. Maybe, I don't know if maybe there's others out there that pack a little bit more punch. But yeah, they're cheap. You can get lots of them. We have a drawer full of them.
Exactly. And you get it in different sizes, like also in the sense that, different capacities. I think even the red cameras are also, the Komodo or so is also using MPF. So it's, used.
It's everywhere.
Yeah.
One thing I always had a problem with is a lot of those batteries don't actually give you this warning when they drain. So I don't know if that's a kind of battery smartness issue, something that the battery cannot talk to a lot of the cameras because they're not Sony or whatever. But sometimes I felt like, especially when you had an NPF battery that's not new anymore, the current would drop from 90% to zero with like literally within a minute, and then your monitor would just die.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I also don't know why. What is this causing? Is it like a microchip that is still in a battery, and there are different qualities of types? I
think that's the case. I think it's like maybe the battery cannot talk to the camera or monitor. And just not warn it that it's going to drop off quickly. I don't know. But that's one of the annoying things about the MPF in because you don't have that problem with the BPUs or the mirrorless kind of batteries, all of them.
You can have a D-tap or something on a MPF also, which can be useful. But I think also on the other Sony batteries that's possible. I think on the BP.
Actually, a good point, because there were some SWIT batteries. Maybe they're still in the market for BPU that had a D-tap, but I remember at some point they were pulled off the market because of some license thing. But they were very useful, of course, to have a D-tap on those batteries. But again, it only amplifies that problem of the dropping current, because if you draw even more power from these batteries, it might be very difficult to...
Gets definitely worse.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Let's move on to Panasonic. Now, Panasonic is also interesting. I would say they, almost like Canon, tried to keep the current standard, which is called, we call it usually the BLK battery, but it's DMW BLK22. And it's remarkable how widely it's shared. That's their mirrorless standard, which is the smaller one back here. Now, it powers the S5, S5 II, S5 IIX, the S9, and then also the Micro Four Thirds cameras, the GH5 II, GH6, GH7, and G9 Mark II. And also the latest full-frame flagships, the S1 II and the S1R II. Now, there is a bit of an outlier. The original S1 generation used a larger, higher capacity version of this, which does not interchange with the BLK22. What's particularly annoying about it is that they look very similar. It's happened to me actually several times. You're also a Panasonic user, right?
Exactly, yeah.
But it's happened to me several times that I tried to put one of those battery into the wrong cameras because they look so similar. Yeah. If you look at this, the only real difference is that it's a little bit like there's a little corner here which is rounder on one of them, and there's an additional 4 pins on
the
one
top,
of the
yeah.
battery standards. Now, all the S1, S1R, S1H use that larger, higher capacity DMW BLJ31, which is not interchangeable with a BLK22. And and then also the older GH and G9 bodies use the DMW BLF19, which has you can at least use the same charger as the 22, but it's also not, interchangeable. I mean, it kind of, you can kind of use them with it, but it's not as, like Panasonic doesn't recommend that you use them across. So it's a little bit confusing. At least they don't have a lot of different standards, but the different batteries they have are annoyingly similar, which makes it difficult in practice. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's also from a manufacturer's perspective, it's definitely probably hard always to have different form factors and use the same batteries always. But of course, this is a important thought also with cameras, because it's when you have to switch every year or like with every camera, you need to get 2 or 3 new batteries. It's annoying, and I think they hopefully try their best, but I think there is still room for improvement or having this definitely always in mind.
Yeah, and you just want to, I mean, what annoys me more than, of course, you need to buy new ones, which is, if you have several camera bodies, it's really annoying if you have different standards in them. But what annoys me almost more is just showing up with the wrong battery, because there is a real chance, if they look so similar, that you might pack the wrong ones, or not, like if you work with assistants, that they actually bring the wrong one or something like that. And it has happened before.
Yeah.
And just for the sake of completeness, we put also their kind of bigger batteries there for what used to be their more professional higher end cameras, which don't exist anymore. Particularly the EVA 1, and then older models also. Like one of the first professional cameras that I bought was the DVX100A, like, I don't know, more than 20 years ago. This standard, I forgot what it was called, was also used for quite a long time, also on the
Varicam maybe, or Varicam as well.
I don't know if the Varicam actually had the same ones, maybe, not sure. It evolved over time as well. You see 2 different standards here. There's also one for their, like smaller kind of camcorder type cameras, which is this one. And because many of those products are discontinued now, we don't really have a successor to the EVA 1. And we didn't really particularly mention this, but I think they try to keep the same ones for a while as well. Now, Fujifilm, it really has 2 battery standards which are cleanly divided, and it's probably one of the tidiest systems around, because the 2 cells that they use have clear roles. There's a compact version which has really served the X series well for a decade. Nobody uses the name because it's confusing. It's NPW126S, and it still covers current models such as the XT50X E5 and also the hugely popular X106 and 5, and alongside earlier XT, X Pro, and XE and XS bodies. So this is really, really a long-lived standard for their smaller cameras, and it's great that they still use it. Now, for higher performance and medium format bodies, they use a different battery type, which is called MPW235, and it holds 1.5 times the capacity of the smaller ones. This was introduced with the XT5. It's also on the XT4, XT5, XH2, XH2S, XS20, and then also with the GFX Eterna, and also the basically all the GFX cameras, GFX 50, GFX 100, and so on, and the successors. So, that's really great. I mean, they have a lot of different cameras, but really only have 2 battery standards, which is great. I think it's just, like if I was a camera manufacturer, I would do it exactly like Fuji. I would just say, okay, these are the two standards we have. Let's build the camera system around it rather than think about the camera and then invent a new battery every time, like Insta360, for example, seems to be doing. Because we already see what's happening. Like you discontinue a product, of course you discontinue the battery, but you leave users stranded that still use your battery system if you do that. And the way Fujifilm and also Canon have been doing it, and to a lesser degree also Panasonic and Sony, I think is much more reliable. Yeah. And DJI also seem to have learned. So yeah. Now with GoPro, it's kind of in the middle there because the Hero 5 through the Hero 8 share one battery. And then you have the Hero 9, 10, 11, and 12 that share another one with a Enduro cold weather cell and then also a standard cell, which is interchangeable across the whole 4th-generation group. Now, yeah, so, but still, if you look at this image, you see a lot of different batteries that look remarkably similar, but yet every single one is different. You look at the tiniest difference between this one and this one, it's probably just 1 millimeter thicker, but other than that, it looks exactly the same. And that's true for various of their standards. Yeah, so there is some cross compatibility, and you can also have a higher capacity version that you don't have to use, but it will basically unlock the most functions on your camera. The complication is the naming, because the Hero 13 Black moves to a new, larger 1900 milliamp hour cell that's not compatible with Hero 9 to 12. Yet GoPro still calls it Enduro, which distinguishes it mainly by a new all-black end cap versus the earlier white-capped versions. The same confusion surrounds the 360 line, when the newer Max 2 uses a different incompatible cell that is again badged Enduro. The batteries are physically different and will not interchange, and so with GoPro, it just simply pays to check the exact model you're using. So you can't trust those batteries to be compatible with each other, and they have just recently added confusion. Now, arguably, yeah, the Hero 13 Black and Max 2 cameras are not as popular, I would say, as predecessors. They're not around as much because there hasn't been so much innovation with the last generation of their action cameras. I mean, the one prior to the Mission 1. But yeah, still worth checking.
Do you know the Mission 1? Does it have probably also...
Good question. It probably uses the same ones as the Hero 13 Black, but I will check this and also update the article. Good point. Now, Blackmagic Design is leaning on open standards. They are, like I mentioned before, they actually used the LPE6, on the Pocket Cinema 4K and 6K and the micro cameras. And then there's also the NPF, the small NPF version that it's called NPF 570 L series cell, is used on the 6K and the Pocket Cinema Camera 6K Pro, the 6K G2, and also the full frame Cinema Camera 6K. So they basically they didn't invent their own battery standard, which is great. They use what's out there, which is open to use, which are those older standards from Canon and Sony, namely the LP6 and NPF series. And that's, I think, a great move. Now, as soon as you move to more professional cameras, of course, I love to use V-mount batteries because they've been the same since forever. I mean, I think since the 90s we've had a V-mount. In America, gold mount is more commonplace, but I think V-mount has been making a lot of inroads over the last decade or so. And now, of course, B-mount, which is used with the Alexa 35 and any camera that uses more power, needs a higher voltage, basically. That's why the B-mount exists. But it builds on the legacy of the V-mount. So V-mount is still everywhere. I mean, we have so many different V-mount batteries that are still compatible, with professional cameras all around, which is great. And you, of course, always have D-tab, you have USB ports, USB-A, USB-C, and it's just very useful. But of course, it's not something that can be used on a smaller camera. I mean, you can, but it's going to make your rig a lot bigger, and you have to use wires and so on. So yeah, just to summarize, it really depends, when you choose a camera system, also to think about the batteries. It's, of course, always an afterthought for a lot of people. But we would be really curious to hear your feedback and your experience with this. I hope there's going to be a lively discussion under this article, because I think it's worth talking about. And looking forward to your feedback. Just, leave a comment on this YouTube video or on the article, which is, of course, linked in the show notes if you want to dive in. And now, a quick commercial break. This episode of Focus Check is brought to you by Hollyland and the Lark A1. If you've been meaning to start capturing better audio on your phone but didn't want to wrestle with menus or pairing, this is the one. The Lark A1 is a wireless lav built for people just getting into this. You plug the USB-C or lighting receiver straight into your phone, clip it on the mic, and you're recording. No app required, no Bluetooth, and no setup ritual. It is tiny, 8 grams, under a centimeter thick, so it disappears on a collar. You get real 48 kilohertz 24-bit audio, a charging case that holds up to 54 hours, and up to 200 meters of range line of sight. There's a Lark sound app if you want to dig into gain and EQ later, but you genuinely don't need it to get going. This is the mic for grabbing everyday moments. The walk and talk, the quick piece to camera, the trip you didn't want to take a full kit for. Just know it's a phone mic and not a full camera rig. The Hollyland Lark A1 starts under $70 US. Follow the link in the show notes to check it out. And now back to the show. All right, let's move on to a documentary that is now in the works, which is called Thank You, Mr. Brown, about Garrett Brown, the inventor of the Steadicam. Now, very interesting person. I've seen him a couple times on trade shows. Unfortunately, I think I've never talked to him, but I hope to have the chance in the future. He literally invented the stabilized camera. And I'm very happy to hear that now we have a documentary that's in the works around him. Because if you look at this pitch trailer that the director Andrew Schwartz made for this documentary, he's been really an inventor his whole life. Garrett Brown used the Steadicam, I think the first time or one of the first times, on Rocky in 1976. And of course, it has this really famous scene of Sylvester Stallone running up the stairs of, I think it's the Museum of Art in Philadelphia. And of course, that's become one of the most well-known tourist attractions there, to kind of do the Rocky move up there. And that shot was shot by Garrett Brown on one of the first rigs of the Steadicam. And you see here in this pitch trailer that Andrew Schwartz actually published on his Vimeo account, how crazy the first versions of the Steadicam looked. And I mean, there was a lot of tinkering going on with until this worked. Then, of course, and here you see actually he chased his girlfriend up the stairs before Rocky, just to try it out. Now, of course, we've taken stabilized cameras for granted now. We have gimbals for the last 10, 15 years. They've really kind of replaced a lot of the shots that used to be done with a Steadicam. But the Steadicam still has a very big place, I think, for larger rigs, and also especially long takes, which are walking takes, because it just simply gives a better result than a gimbal in many of those cases. With a gimbal, of course, having the advantage that you can more easily change the height and hand it over to somebody else and so on. But really, really fascinating. We will follow this for a longer period of time, because I'm just really interested in the production here. Here's a very nice behind the scenes still of Garrett Brown alongside Stanley Kubrick and Danny Lloyd, one of the stars of The Shining, in this famous maze scene at the end of the movie, where of course the Steadicam was used. Just really, really interesting. And here's a prototype of the Steadicam, of what it used to look like before it was an actual product, completely different, and a lot of experimentation going on. Also, what's really interesting for me here is you can see how he was trying to get a viewfinder, because of course the problem with any stabilized camera is like, how do you still monitor the image as you're walking? We know this problem from gimbals. Now we have, of course, monitors. Old film cameras didn't have monitors, they only had viewfinders. So they needed to find a way to see the image while they were walking, when not able to look through the viewfinder. So he actually seemed to make a contraption which is connected via cable that allowed him to monitor what he was shooting as he was walking. It's actually a problem that, like you still have on a gimbal these days, which I think is still not fully solved, to be honest, because looking at this small screen while you're walking a gimbal is not the same thing as looking through a viewfinder. We also embedded the Rocky montage here in the article, which showed the clip from that movie, of course. And of course, Garrett Brown patented the hell out of this idea, and rightly so, and was very successful with it for a very long time. Now, of course, the Steadicam brand has been owned by Tiffin for, I think, over the last 25 years. And is still, to this day being marketed under the Steadicam name. There's, of course, a lot of competitors in the market that also make stabilized mechanical rigs, like the Artemis system from ARRI, which used to be Sachtler, now it's ARRI. And there's also GlideCam, of course, and a lot of others. But since gimbals, were released, of course, we see less innovation in this space. But of course, there's the what is it called, the Artemis Trinity, which is kind of a combination of a gimbal and a kind of Steadicam stabilized rig. So yeah, but it's just a very fascinating approach, because he says one thing in the pitch trailer here, Mr. Brown, that you need to be willing to look like an idiot to get a perfect shot. And I think he proved that it's working, Just think about the time where everything was locked off for either a dolly or locked off shot before that. And then this guy comes along and suddenly made the camera move, right? Mm-hmm. You like completely smoothly move it. I think we're so used to it now, but what it meant at the time, you can really look at when you look at the movies from that time. And don't forget that he's also the guy who invented I think it was called the Skycam or Flycam, actually. So what has become a standard for sports broadcasts, mm-hmm. Like the camera flying over the fields and so on, is also an invention by Garrett Brown. So I'm really looking forward to see this documentary. And I actually saw that Andrew Schwartz thanked us for publishing this article. So maybe he wants to come on the podcast. If you listen to this, we'll be willing to talk to you about this even before the film is done, if you are up for it. And by the way, this documentary is now backed by Francis Ford Coppola, because he, of course, also recognizes the impact that Garrett Brown had. He's just one of those guys who really revolutionized filmmaking, and I think a lot of people outside the industry have never heard his name. So he more than deserves a documentary about it. Let's move on to the camera news of this week. First and foremost, ARRI released the Alexa 35 Live Xtreme. Now, of course, we've had the Alexa 35 Xtreme really replaced the Alexa 35. If you go to ARRI's website, there's no Alexa 35 anymore. It's just the Xtreme, which is interesting. So yeah, that's weird, right? It's like, let me look again on the ARRI website. But I saw that when you click on Cine Systems, there is no 35 anymore. There's just the Xtreme. Mm-hmm. So I guess they keep the lineup more simple here. And the Xtreme basically, but I think there's different versions of this where you can upgrade, right? So that's probably the differentiating factor. But basically the ARRI Alexa Xtreme, of course, introduced high speed of up to 660 frames per second. Now, in parallel to that, they had the Alexa 35 Live, which we, of course, documented a lot for around the Eurovision behind the scenes documentary, where I was embedded with them for like 6 weeks, and where this was really used for broadcast. I mean, we still have this linked everywhere. So if you haven't seen that documentary, I'm looking forward to your comments. But now they're combining both things. So they are combining the high speed of the Alexa 35 Xtreme with the live factor. Basically, of course, making this the perfect sports camera because we like high speed in sports. And there's a nice reel that they published also with some examples where it can be used, of course. This is shot, the project frame rate, I think, is 50 frames per second. That's why it looks a little bit more newsy than what you're used to from ARRI footage. But, of course, high-speed recording with a larger sensor like the Alexa 35 sensor is something that's not the standard in broadcast. I mean, usually broadcast cameras for all those high-speed shots that you get from football or skiing and so on are tiny sensors with all the caveats of tiny sensors, particularly, of course, a very deep depth of field and also less light sensitivity. So, and when we talk about dynamic range, one of the things where the Alexa 35 shines the most, this is particularly important for sports because you know how it is. If in a football field you have half the field in the shade and the other half in the sunlight, you need a high dynamic range actually. Now, the little caveat here is, of course, shooting high speed with the Alexa 35 Xtreme means that you are sacrificing quite a bit of dynamic range compared to those normal modes. However, it's still much better than in most broadcast cameras, so you will get a better result here. So I think it's a smart and logical next step here. And yeah, we are outlining this here in the article of what that means, where the trade-off is when you enable the sensor overdrive in terms of dynamic range and so on. And we actually have we still haven't published the dynamic range results for the Xtreme high-speed numbers. We have lab tested it. We are working on this lab test still to see the difference actually compared to the normal modes. Yeah, so just check it out. And also, if you haven't seen it, this completely ties into what ARRI's new owner, Thomas Riedel, has outlined for ARRI as, the plans for the company. For an interview we did, an exclusive interview we did around NAB in Las Vegas earlier this year. So check that out if you haven't seen that as well. All right, and moving on to another new camera of the week, which is completely different budget range. We're talking about a small thing that was announced on Kickstarter, which was called the I don't even know how to say it, AulGo pocket camera from a company I've never heard of. They're called TriLife. And this company released a tiny 4K smart camera, which is made really to, be used on the go. It is magnetic. It has 4K. It uses a Sony sensor. Don't expect wonders in terms of picture quality. I think even the demo footage, arguably, it looks okay, but it's not, great. However, it seems very versatile because it's extremely small. It reminds me a little bit of the Insta360 Go series of cameras in terms of size. Now, I don't know why it has kind of two lenses because I don't think it doesn't have different focal lengths as far as I'm aware. At least I couldn't find them on the Kickstarter campaign. So maybe one of them is just to measure. Wait a second. So this is a Sony IMX486 sensor with 12 megapixel stills capture. Yeah, so it's just one lens really. And the field of view is probably very wide. It is a 1/2.9 inch sensor and has been used in a lot of different other mobile devices. It's smaller than the one that Insta360 uses in the Go Ultra. It has built-in gyro-based electronic image stabilization for what they say 6 axes. And yeah, I mean, it's what counts here, I think, is not the image quality, it's more the versatility. Because arguably, for me, this is like the action camera that's really an action camera, right? Do you know what the DJI also has a small one now like this, right?
I think it's
Nano.
Yeah,
it's a
true,
Nano.
true,
Yeah, it's a DJI Osmo
Nano.
Action Nano, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think this form factor for me is really an action camera form factor. Of course, always with a little bit of trade-off when it comes to image quality, but I think it's so much more versatile than the larger ones even. They have some great examples here for where you can put it because it's magnetic. You can use it as a dashboard camera. You can just attach it magnetically to the side of your car to get a really quick shot of your wheel spinning and stuff like that. So, I mean, it is tiny, and that's what it's going for. And also, pricing-wise, we're talking about $200, so it's quite cheap. It's already, again, this is a Kickstarter, so take all of what I said with a grain of salt. We've never heard of the company. We don't have any contact with the company. We've not touched the product. This is just a pure news article, but it's already has 230 backers, and so 7 days to go. It's still out there. So, new pocket camera, AulGo. And then Sony teased the new RX10, a new generation of their RX10 series. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but because by the time you see this, it's probably already out, and we don't have many more details right now. Now, what's interesting is just that they decided to upgrade this category for the first time in 9 years, because the RX10, what is the last one? Mark 5? No, 4? Yeah, 4 was announced in 2017, and it's actually been out of production for a while now. So now they teased a new version of this, which probably will be called RX10 Mark 5. And let's see. Yeah. So the cool thing is it has a good zoom range. The RX10 Mark IV had a 24 to 600 millimeter equivalent size Vario sonar zoom with S-Log3 recording. And so we can expect S-Log again in the new one. Let's see if the lens will be better or faster. The zoom range is, of course, amazing for something like this. It's a category that really got out of fashion. There used to be the Nikon Coolpix series. We also used to have Panasonic making these cameras, and also Canon. And it's kind of, because of the smartphone, I think it's got a little bit out of fashion. But I think they're kind of capitalizing on the success of those purpose-built niche cameras that Fujifilm has been having with like the
X100,
X100VI and so on, and also even, I mean, they did the GFX100 RF with a fixed lens.
Exactly, yeah.
So now the fixed lens cameras are coming back into fashion. We learned that a lot of Gen Z creators actually want a device that does less.
Yeah, a dedicated device for only taking pictures or videos and not taking your phone, and while your mom is calling, you have like taking pictures or stuff. So I think,
and also different focal lengths. I think a lot of people get bored by the focal lengths you have on a smartphone, which is usually very wide angle or super tele, but nothing in between. That's the one thing that annoys me, actually. I don't have a 50 mil and a phone or something. But yeah, I think it's nice that it's coming back into fashion, and it's funny that the whole category was kind of dormant for 10 years and now it's coming back. Interesting move. Let's see. KipperTie announced the LCcineND. Oh, actually, they did announce it before, but now it's available. Now, a little bit of a backstory here. LC Tech, company from Sweden, announced their electronic variable ND a couple of years ago and was open to licensing this into various products. And we are seeing now more and more products with this. We see adapters, like lens adapters that actually house a variable ND. We also have cameras like the Fujifilm GFX Eterna, which has a variable ND, which uses the LC Tech technology. And now we also have a drop-in filter for matte boxes that uses this remote controllable electronic ND filter in a 4/5.6 inch size, which is of course a standard size. Now the cool thing is this has a built-in wheel. The adjustment is, the ND range is from 1.5 to 5 stops. And they say there is color accuracy across all strengths, durable design, and also the ability to remote control the intensity via a smartphone app or a follow focus motor, which is of course very useful. You connect this to your first AC's follow focus control, and they can just do that over the remote, as they also change the aperture with the aperture motors on the lens and the focus, of course. Just really, really useful to have this. And then there's also the app here. Now, it's not exactly cheap compared to a traditional filter, because we're talking about 1,750 pounds, which equals around $2,340. And if you order now, they will start shipping in September.
And you need to think also that it needs a battery, so it can run out of battery. I think they say 24 hours that the battery holds, but still, of course,
it's a built-in battery. Actually?
It's a built-in battery with, you can charge it with USB-C. So I think you could also charge it while shooting, but just to keep in mind that this is also a new thing, that you need like a power supply for an ND filter now. So
yeah, that's true. However, I don't think it needs a lot of battery, because you said it's like it's only going to draw power when you actually adjust it. As far as I know, it's not actually drawing power when it's just static in a way. I mean, the one thing that I think we would really love to see is a clear ND, just the ability to completely clear this, which technically doesn't seem to be possible. We don't have this in the Sony cameras as well. With electronic variable ND, there still needs to be a physical filter moved in front of the sensor. Because if that was possible, I think we would see electronic variable NDs in
mirrorless,
in all kinds of devices. I mean, you could have it in a smartphone.
Yeah.
Because if it's clear, right? You can just enable it. That would be absolutely amazing if at some point this would be possible.
Yeah, looking forward also to have this in sunglasses or stuff. So like if you kind of drive with your car, you have it like.
I mean, there is, like you have those sunglasses that adjust to the.
But that works with
lighting.
Polarizing, I think, but it's I don't know if it's the same technology, but I think it's kind of also interesting for these types.
Yeah, but it's great. I mean, I just love that LC Tech is licensing these to different companies, and you see it show up in different products, and that they didn't sell the patent or technology to one manufacturer. So it's just simply great to now also have Fujifilm have this technology in their camera, because they're the only ones apart from Sony that have an electronic variable ND built into at least one of their cameras. All right, let's move on to some lighting news. Now, the KNOWLED brand from Godox is, of course, their lighting brand. And they've announced 2 new fixtures, which are COB lights, the PL600RF and the PL1200RF. Now, basically, they have teased their PaletteLab as a color science idea for a while. And of course, this is similar to what Aperture does with, what is it called? The Blair engine, I think.
Yeah.
And the obvious question for Godox was which fixtures would actually carry it. Now we have the answer at the pro end. The PL600RF and PL1200RF are 2 all-in-one point source heads with a full engine. And we also have published specs and published illuminance data. So they're 600 watts and 1,200 watts respectively. As I said, flat Bowens mounts with 1,800 Kelvin to 10,000 Kelvin spectrum, IP65 weather sealed, CRMX built in, and a 9-band full spectrum color engine as a headline. They're not light. They are 8.7 and 11.3 kilograms, respectively. The core story here, it's about the color and not the output. The differentiator here isn't the brightness, it's really the engine. So, it's all about preciseness and being accurate on set, also with the skin tones. It's significant to mention that it's not a RGB-WW product, because they say it's a step beyond RGB-WW. The color mixing at the DMX level is RGBW, which is why it has that connector. But it's supposedly better than RGBWW at the light mixing inside the light. The pitch here is that the spectral continuity. It's filling the gaps between the blue and the cyan, and between the orange, red, and deep red here. And that's like what you see in their color quality readings here. And that's where they leave the weaker LEDs behind. We're talking about the CRI of 98 and TLCI of 99. Again, all of those specs are manufacturer claims. We have not verified them, but I wouldn't, I wouldn't really question them. I think so far color readings of manufacturers have been quite accurate from our reviews, actually. It's unlike dynamic range testing in cameras, actually. The form factor matters here because I think it's nice that it's an all-in-one design. The power supply is built into the heads, which of course makes them heavier. But that means you have no external ballast, no proprietary ballast cable, and simply one less thing to break or rig. The trade-off is just the weight, of course. I mean, you coming in at 8.7 and 11.3 kilograms.
And you need, if you have it on a stand like quite high, you can't kind of change stuff. So, or you can use the app. You have the app, but if you don't have the app, you need to, because that's also with the external ones, you have a kind of a wired control. But
fair enough. But I think I would prefer it this way, to have an all-in-one design, because I mean, I've had light cables break before, and sometimes it's really annoying to get them fixed, and it's just and it's also something you can forget. I mean, it's
just I had sometimes the situations where you have it on a stand and you just need to adjust it a little bit, and you don't have maybe the app, and you need to bring down the light again and then adjust it and bring it back. So this is it can be a bit frustrating as well. But of course, it's this or that trade-off.
Absolutely. And I think the IP65 is actually kind of a big deal, because I mean, it's significant that you can literally leave them in the rain. There is also means full dust protection, and it just basically removes any need to protect the lights otherwise if there's just normal kind of rain outside. And it's not true for a lot of the LED lights in the market, I think. Output figures, again, manufacturer claims, but the PL600 RF has up to 148,000 lux at 1 meter at 4,300 Kelvin with a reflector in normal mode, and then double that for the PL1200 RF. And there's high-speed modes that actually push the peak brightness higher, and they supposedly run flicker-free at high frame rates. Also a big deal. I mean, we've seen a lot of flicker from a lot of actually, quite high-end LED lights in the past as well. Now, we know that pricing is competitive, $2,000 for the PL600 RF and around $3,500 for the PL1200 RF. Availability about 2 months from now. Good. So, let us know if you're, interested in a full spectrum color science light, and because we've heard from a lot of people that, like in the past, RGBWW lights were actually not precise enough for them. So I'm curious if you see that lights like these make actually a difference for you. And let's move on to Tilta. Tilta announced iPhone lenses, which have fisheye, macro, wide, and telephoto glass for T-mount. Now, T-mount sounds like a standard that is, compatible like any, like kind of mount, but it has to be taken with a grain of salt, because the whole T-mount is a little bit slippery across the mobile accessory market, because different manufacturers are applying it to incompatible mechanical standards. So Tilta's T-series adapter uses its own locking interface, so that lenses are designed to work within the Kronos ecosystem. That's their smartphone accessories, and other T-mount compatible cases rather than a universal solution. So don't trust just the T-mount moniker. If you see it somewhere, it's not going to be interchangeable throughout all the manufacturers that actually make it, which is confusing. Now, down to the lenses, there's an 8mm fisheye, which delivers a 220-degree field of view, which is, of course, interesting, heavy distortion, cool for, action work, like filming pets and all that kind of stuff, music videos. And then there's a 16mm wide angle. This is supposedly not really distorting too much. It has edge-to-edge sharpness. And Tilta would suggest this for architecture, landscapes, and group shots. Here's a good example of a shot that, and this is a 16mm, of course, that you put on the main lens. So, of course, if you have an iPhone, you have a 16mm wide angle. However, is it 16mm? I think it's 6mm or 12mm.
I think like a 16 or 14.
Or 14, yeah. Something. It's very similar, actually. The wide angle on one of the current iPhones. But if you put this on your main lens, you will, of course, have the advantages of the better sensor there, which is more light sensitive. Of course, you will lose some light by adding a lens like that, but you should still have better quality here. Then there's a 10x macro lens, which is really, of course, made for close-up detail work. Looks really cool, actually. That's, of course, also, again, the wide angle on the iPhone is also a macro lens, but it's a wide angle. So you sometimes want more magnification on a macro. And I think that's one of the uses that I see a lot of people do with smartphones, is getting macro shots with one of those added lenses. And then there's a 40mm telephoto, which I find the most useful because it actually kind of pushes you into that classical portrait shot territory, which I'm missing from smartphone built-in lenses. And if you look at the demo shot here, this is the most impressive for me, because I would not be able to say that this was shot on a smartphone if I saw it like that, purely from judging the field of view, because we are so used to seeing this typical 24mm main camera shots from an iPhone specifically. And then also, of course, the super tele and the super wide angle, but we're not used to seeing this 40mm shot. I would probably use this the most. All of those lenses are quite affordable. We're talking about $69 and $89 respectively, and they require a Chronos case to be used, but they're now available and seem to be quite popular already. Moving on to just a quick mention, Bending Spoons, the owner of Vimeo and Filmic Pro, is now a public company. They have had their NASDAQ IPO last week. Why is this important to mention? Well, Bending Spoons is very controversial in the industry. They also, apart from Vimeo, Filmic Pro, they also own WeTransfer. They've been known to take over digital businesses that kind of have been a little bit struggling and then optimize them to be, big money makers essentially, which always was hand in hand with, like firing a lot of people actually. And but they're using a lot of kind of AI optimization across everything. I just wrote about this because I think it's important to look at what's going to happen, because as a public company, of course, they have to satisfy shareholders, which means changes. It's good and bad, right? You need more updates to those sites. You need more frequent new additions of features in order to keep shareholders happy and the stock price high. But it also means they will squeeze those companies for even more money to be more, because shareholders will look after their returns more than private owners, and they might have a shorter attention span and shorter willingness to sacrifice profits over the short term. So let's see, and we'll keep an eye on this. They have been quite successful with their IPO. I think the stock has, within the first day or so, increased by over 40%. Let me look at where they are now. how they have developed. Well, actually, they flattened out a little bit. They're kind of back to where they started. So I'll take that back. But yeah, at least let's see. Let's see where things are moving. Of course, they already announced that they will use the money that they make in the IPO to acquire more digital businesses over time. And we'll talk about software in a second, but let's actually start. Let's start with software now. There is another business-related news, which is Boris FX acquiring iZotope. Now, Felix, you're as an audio guy, what do you make of this?
Yeah, it's funny. Like iZotope is, I use it quite often, and it's the professional tool for restoring audio, denoising audio, or also like make loudness normalizations, especially like for podcasts and stuff. I use it quite often, and it's funny because this company got like bought and sold a lot of times in the recent year. I think the last thing that I heard that it was part of Native Instruments, which also, so far I heard, had a bit of struggled a bit recently, and that was also the reason they sold like iZotope. But I think in general it's good that they sold it to a other software company that is close to filmmakers and post-production artists. So I think also what they are saying here in the article, or generally the press release, that all the versions sold, the licenses are staying, like for the user nothing changes basically. So they are also willing to invest in new developments of software and stuff. So I think generally that's good for the users and for the company itself as well. And there is not only iZotope RX, there is also Ozone, which is a mastering software, and it's a well-known company in the audio industry, and now also maybe even more in the filmmaker industry. But
Boris FX is more known for visual effects, right?
Visual effects, actually. It's, I think, the quite popular software is Mocha, which was used for, like, I think it was even like implemented in After Effects for rotoscoping and stuff. And so
all right, let's see. Let's actually stick with software for a little bit, and because I think we see a lot of consolidation in the software market, partly because it's become quite easy to make your own software. And as we've mentioned over the last week and the last couple of weeks, we get more and more and more emails from filmmakers who made their own apps through vibe coding, and a lot of them have no clue about coding, which is very, very interesting to me. And it seems to be so accessible now that we see a lot of very useful stuff come out, and a lot of times it's actually for free. And I want to highlight two pieces of software that actually fill that quality. They're both free and for Mac. Now, first of all, we learned about the Beat app this week, which is a free Mac tool for story development and shot planning. Now, if you look at the interface, people who have played with Claude Code and Claude before, as we have for a landing page for MZ, actually, you kind of know the style that it produces, and I think it's very easy to say that this has probably been used for this as well. So Beat is a free Mac app that really combines story development, references, characters, locations, and shoot planning in one visual canvas. So it's based around a node-based workflow, and I'm just going to play a demo video here. So you can start with a blank canvas and then just define the kind of structure that this should have. And then you work with nodes very much like you would do using DaVinci Resolve, actually. And it reminds me a little bit of Notion, if any of you have used Notion, which is also kind of mind mapping tool. And it's incredible how cool this Beat app actually looks, like just to develop a visual storyline here using your storyboard, connect all the dots, kind of connect everything that's happening in your story, and just visualize the shot planning. You can also add locations of where you want to shoot, and share this with your collaborators. Very useful for the planning, shot planning and location scouting. Just you combine the location scouted, the images from the location scouting with the actual location, give everybody an overview and so on. It's really, really smart. Actually, you can position little figures and movement inside your location photos and just define where people should move, where the actors should move, and so on. Maybe this is something we should look at for our shot listing course, which of course also works with, some of those tools, but not this specific tool. But it seems to combine a lot of the functions that are out there in different other tools. So it's really great to plan your lighting and blocking also, and the story itself. There's even the possibility to connect to Claude through MCP, which is this connecting method, and then you have an AI assistant to work with the project rather than just do it manually. And the maker of this actually is in our comment as well. His name is, I hope to say the name right, Boris. And he said he vibe coded it. So completely vibe coded. I'm not a developer at all. And just very impressive what's possible now, the complexity of this. And it's free. I mean, he's not charging money for this. You can just download it. I think so far there's also not really...
There's no premium plan, or is
there is a premium plan?
Okay.
So there are many... no, it's actually...
Completely
for now,
free?
it's completely free.
Oh, wow.
He has no... he hasn't announced that he will charge for it or whatever. Maybe he will in the future to add some stuff, of course, to get work. But it's amazing. I mean, it's you can use this entirely for free. And another thing that's free is called Clip Sweeper version 2. Keep that very short. That's a tool similar to other tools in the market that kind of scan your hard disk for files you don't need anymore. Just that this tool focuses on video files. So it really knows what to look for. And it actually cleans out Premiere project and DaVinci projects for unused files, which is very useful, right? It can also compress some video that you have that you want to keep, but just compress it for archiving, and then just make it smaller, basically. Also, it looks like it's wipe coded. It's completely free. It's called Clip Sweeper version 2.
I think especially right now, as the hard drive market and everything is so expensive, this is a very useful thing. I think if you can kind of clean up some older projects and get more space on your hard drive, I think that's
absolutely
definitely useful. And it seems that like people are just starting to, if they need a tool, they just build it by themselves. So that's nice.
I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think that's one of the reasons why companies like Adobe are in trouble, because it's become very easy to make your own software. Not the entire complexity of everything yet, but we're getting there. And then let's talk about a probably non-vibe coded app, Artemis Studio. Now, a lot of you might know Artemis Viewfinder, which, like Kadrash, is a director's viewfinder on iPhone. And now already a while ago, they actually announced Artemis Studio for Mac, which is the desktop companion app for Artemis Viewfinder. Now, actually, it used to be called Artemis Gallery, and they renamed it to Studio, which I found a little bit confusing. But now so you have this integration. The Artemis Studio is the desktop half of that ecosystem, and now it gives teams a workspace to organize, plan, and share visual ideas, and it connects directly to the iOS app through iCloud. So the cool thing it synchronizes between Artemis Studio and the Viewfinder app, so you can start planning your shoot on the phone and then move on to the Mac. And it will also, allow you to export and share shot lists with metadata, storyboards, with camera data, and also sun data, which I think this is also a function of Artemis Viewfinder that has just been added. I think I'll write a separate article about that. So you can now have the position of the sun, can also plan that out within the Artemis Viewfinder app. and this will also be connected to the Studio app. So really, really cool. Check it out. This is now available in the Mac App Store, and I think they have probably subscription plans. I don't think it's entirely free, but I'm not sure. And then last but not least, DaVinci Resolve 2102 was released, which adds keyframe fixes, retime, curve improvements, and better fusion vertical transitions. Now, it's not a huge update, but always worth doing. A lot of small fixes here, also addressing the decode performance of NVIDIA hardware using H.265 and H.264 codecs. There seemed to be a bug before, so I guess that's the reason why they actually pushed another update within a week. And just always worth kind of checking out. Fusion Studio also gets a matching update. And then, of course, the update for DaVinci and DaVinci Studio 21. All right, let's wrap it up here. Thank you, Felix.
Yeah, thank you
for allowing me to catch some breath every now and then. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Next week, we'll be back with Johnny, also remotely from Japan. And don't forget to leave a comment on this article or the YouTube video, and email us at podcast@cined.com. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform. Thank you. Bye.